Hello, hello, hello. What are you eating today? That's my question. Um, Today I ate some, what do you call it? Ciabatta bread, um, like made the day of, with a delicious salad of bitter greens with charcuterie and a little piece of leftover sandwich. Later, maybe I'll have some canned sardine and mackerel. We'll see about that. Um, but that's what I ate right before playing this. So last time I was in an alternate universe. Pretty cool, honestly. Getting the experience in an alternate universe. It's a different playstyle, different feel. It was It reminded me the variety that oh, my pencil fell down. The variety that Dark Souls playstyles can have. But I wanted to address something that I consider kind of very important, because I don't like to lie. And I guess you could say that I didn't lie, but I didn't lie. I just was completely off base, and I can't even tell you what I was thinking of when I talked about that. But I talked about how Picasas or Pisacas were yeah, I call them Picasas, but they're actually called Pisacas. And they're a kind of oh, what? They're kind of demon in Eastern, like, mythology. I think specifically it's a Hindu. But yeah, they're like a kind of demon, and they eat corpses, and they're kind of like parasites, and they can take over people's bodies and make them do horrible things. But to my knowledge, they're only able to possess kind of bad people. So to me, it kind of makes me think of the Wendigo, which is like, it's this spirit that takes over you if you're a cannibal, and then it makes you do these horrible things. But anyway, I was thinking, for some reason, I kept thinking of D&D creatures. But the thing is, now I can't tell you what the D&D creature I was thinking of was. I was just somehow convinced that Isakas were something from D&D. But yeah, so I was completely off base there, and I apologize for misinforming. I hate misinforming people. Yeah, it makes me feel like a liar. People on the internet, when they see things, they often think it's true, especially if the person speaks with a certain level of confidence, or a certain level of how do you say, authority. So the fact that I kind of sounded pretty confident in what I was saying, despite me being totally off base, I have to fix that. There's a guy up there. I don't like the way he looks. We got our new spells. Try them out, Oh no, an ambush. What? So one thing I like about this map, and this is something that when they announced the DLC for Dark Souls 1 a long time ago, all these years ago, they said that you were gonna get to see Ulla's seal, and they said you were gonna get to see Arturus' grave. So a lot of people had guessed, even before the DLC had come out, the DLC was gonna take place in a past version of the DLC. Sort of they're pretty can't speak. They were pretty obvious about what their goal was, but basically they made it sort of clear that the DLC was going to take place in the past, and a lot of people guessed that it was going to take place in a past version of what do you call it? A past version of Darkroot Garden, and that this past version of Darkroot Garden was Ulasil, and that Dusk is actually a time traveler of sorts, and that you were going to then become a time traveler. It's kind of cool because as soon as you play the DLC, you really get to see that. You really get to see that that past Darkroot Garden. I mean, there's these guys which are they've probably devolved. I don't know how you would say it. They've like devolved into those plant guys you see in Darkroot Garden. And these guys have mossed over and become old and busted, and they're the tranquil walk of peace casting mossy stone knights you see in Darkroot Garden. So already, obviously, just from the level geometry and from the enemy designs, and from the look of the level, you can tell that you're in you're in like the past version of Darkroot Garden. But what's even more cool, and something that I learned very recently actually, is that there's a lot of overlap in the Ulasil forest that we're in right now. And it turns out that this area and the next area, the Ulasil Township, and the Chasm of the Abyss, it's pretty close to New Londo. Like geometrically speaking, if we were to compare it to Darkroot Garden as it is now. And what I find interesting about that, oh my god, is that the Abyss has tainted Ulasil. We know this. They've warned Elizabeth warned us, and we know that Artorias fought the Abyss and was potentially consumed by the Abyss, and we know that the only other place that kind of got messed up with the Abyss like that was New Londo, and New Londo is in the base game is the only place that has the Abyss, and it's a pit that you can fall into that is pitch black. And I have no way of proving it because you have to kind of check the level maps and check like the geometry and how everything like lines up. But basically, you can take my word for it, and you can even look it up. You can look it up in on YouTube, or there's a video. If I don't remember the name of the video, but it's called something like showing the link between Ulasil and New Londo or something like that. And that video basically does exactly what I'm talking about. It shows you the level geometry using like debug tools and whatever to highlight the fact that the Abyss is actually the Abyss from New Londo, and New Londo itself is actually really close to Ulasil. So it makes sense that like this the Abyss that you fight in New Londo is the source of the Abyss, is like a piece of the Abyss that ended up taking over Ulasil. And the fact that these two places that are connected game-wise through you needing to beat Sif to have access to the Abyss Walker Ring to then go to New Londo to fight Four Kings. Obviously it's how do you say that? It's like a loose connection because like, well, Sif was Artorias's dog, so the fact that you have to Sif was Artorias's dog, so the fact that you have to fight Sif to get the Abyss Walker Ring, and then you can use the Abyss Walker Ring to go in the Abyss. It connects those two places loosely, and then the DLC connects them truly, and it creates the story of the Abyss and of Ulasil. So that's interesting. But enough talking about the lore. These videos are not me talking about the lore, it's just that in this case, I guess what I'm trying to talk about is just how much the game cares about its level geometry, to the point that even these kinds of things that the player's probably not ever gonna notice, they actually they care enough to do it, you know. And they're already getting closer to the abyss. You can see here, and the dark, juicy looking corruption. I know earlier, you know, we saw the dragon Calamite on the bridge, and I like that encounter because the first time you meet the Drake in Undead Berg, the Drake kind of just flies there, lands, doesn't pay attention to you, and just keeps going. Whereas this one, you could say, like, at this point in the game, you're pretty strong now. You know, you've defeated Ornstein and Smo, you've defeated a bunch of bosses. You know, you have the Lord Vessel. So when you show up here, you know, you're kind of a worthy threat. So the dragon actually notices you. Stares at you with its I don't know what to call it, because it's actually not its eyeball. Yeah, look at that. If you collide with things, it destroys the crystals that are hovering around you. So you have to be careful about how you move. I actually find it kind of an interesting consideration, because the spell's pretty strong, because it's an automatic spell that homes in onto people. So to make it a little bit weaker, they made it so if you collide with things, it easily destroys the spell. So, you know, it's a little thing, but it's kind of cool. And the fact that the dragon notices you also is a little thing that I find kind of cool, because it's a way of acknowledging the player's growth to get to this point in the game, but also it showcases the fact that you know, you're probably gonna fight that dragon later. Because if the dragon notices you, it's well, first of all, if you see a dragon, obviously, if you see an enemy, you know, as a tease like that, you better get to fight it first of all. So what is that, like Chekhov's gun? Like if they show you something, then eventually that thing is gonna become relevant. But also, if you show the player a dragon in this DLC, that's meant to have like these cool boss fights. You know, the player's gonna hope that they can fight the dragon. I mean, if you think about it, also from like a what do we want to offer to the player's standpoint, oh look, it's another crystal lizard, probably leading us into an ambush, honestly. But yeah, you know, it's like what do you want to offer players who play the DLC? And the answer is, you know, maybe give them a boss fight against a dragon that actually feels like one. And the reason I say this is because, of course, there's the Gaping Dragon, but like we've talked about many times, the Gaping Dragon is kind of a ouch, ouch, ouch. I like the attack they do where they throw themselves and they do like a dive as they attack. But yeah, like the Gaping Dragon, as we've talked about many times, is not a true dragon. It's been mutated and deformed, and you know, it doesn't fly around or anything. And then in the base game, the only other dragon you fight is going to be Mr. Seath the Scaleless, who I've discussed at length as to why I think he's a bad boss fight. And not just a bad boss fight, but a bad caster boss fight, and also a bad dragon boss fight. And the drakes are not dragons, they're drakes, and the drakes are also, they feel more like their they feel more like their game mechanics are like the level obstacles, and they feel like actual you know, conscious enemies. So that's the other thing, right? It's that you've never truly gotten to fight a dragon in any significant way in these games yet. So having a dragon like that would be fun, probably. So showing you a dragon like that, being like, yeah, we've heard you. You know, we're gonna give you what you want. You want to fight a dragon, you'll get to fight a dragon. Now, Calamite, of course, once again, because the game wants to make sure that dragons retain their dignity and their strength, and that, you know, you make this loser of a main character get to defeat a dragon. The way they make that feel feasible is that the dragon's been corrupted by the abyss, so it's not it's perhaps not what a true dragon would be, first of all. But then second of all, it's also a I feel so slow, man. Second of all, it's also a dragon that will behave pretty intelligently, because you know dragons can fly and they can breathe fire. So what he does is he just kind of does drive-bys, or flybys, I guess. Does flybys towards the. I love that attack. He does flybys over his arena and just breathes fire at you and destroys you in one hit, with no risk involved on his part. So the fact that the fact that he does that, you know, of course it kind of makes it feel like a level gimmick in a way, just like the Drake at the bridge in Undead Berg. However, I will say that it's also a very logical thing for a dragon to do, so I'm not too miffed about that. Just that, you know, it feels artificial because he repeats the same animation and does the same thing over and over and over and over again. So you might say that it's like a bit boring. But anyway, you have to talk to an NPC, and by talking to the NPC, you'll trigger a special cutscene where the NPC shoots the dragon out of midair, and it weakens him, so he can't fly as well anymore. So then you can fight the dragon the proper way, so to speak. So the dragon's weakened and has been corrupted by the abyss, so the dragon is not all he used to be. So even when you get to fight the dragon, you know, once again, the dragon gets to kind of preserve... The dragons of Dark Souls get to preserve their mystical quality. So anyway, yeah, what do they want to offer the player? Okay, well, they want to offer a dragon boss fight. They want to offer information, probably, on the last remaining nights that we haven't seen. Because we've heard so much about the 4 Knights of Gwyn from item descriptions, which I've not been showing very much, but... So the Wolf Ring, the Leo Ring, the Hornet Ring, and the ouch. You've all these rings, right? And they all talk about a different knight. You know, the Leo Ring is Ornstein's ring. The Hornet Ring is Lord's Blade Kieran's ring. The Wolf Ring is Artorias, and the Hawk Ring is Hawkeye Go. And then you have all these things where, you know, Artorias is the Abyss Walker, and there's these legends about him, and you get to fight his pet wolf, I guess, or his maybe it's not his pet, more like his companion. But you get to fight his oh my god, I got ultra stunlocked by these scissor wielders. But yeah, you hear so much about Artorias and about the other knights. We never get to see them, probably because they died before the events of the game. So getting to travel in time, it gets to potentially answer a lot of questions that you may be asking yourself. Like, what's the deal with these knights? There's such questions, so they get to answer those questions. And just in general too, they get to showcase their skills at making levels and making boss encounters, because now, you know, they have, you know, they probably sit under time and budget constraints, but at least they have money and time to dedicate on one thing, which is the DLC. You know, so they get to put a more focused effort into it. Now, probably, you know, they were working on Bloodborne and they were working on Dark Souls 2, so, you know, it wasn't the entire team that worked on Dark Souls that worked on the DLC, but the people who were there, they got to work probably on Demon Souls and on Dark Souls 1, so they had learned a lot at that point, so they get to showcase a lot of what they learned by doing this DLC. And the DLC has some good levels, has some good enemies, has some good bosses, has some good music, art direction, and so on. So you'll see, it's a very nice. Oh my god! It's a very nice, a very nice piece of paid content, and I'm glad that it's you know, like when they added Dark Souls to PC, that this is what they added to the game at the same time. Yeah, Dark Souls feels almost like it's missing something without it. So, but apparently, you know, when they released Dark Souls, they weren't necessarily expecting to do a DLC. So, it's not like, oh, they made an incomplete game and now the game's complete. They made an incomplete game and this is just a different part that they added to it. And the reason I say they made an incomplete game is because Dark Souls has notoriously a lot of that content, and Dark Souls has you say this. Dark Souls has a lot of rushed content as well, where you could tell that they wanted to do more, but they couldn't. Like with the Demon Ruins and Lost Isolate, for example. These scissor guys, man, they're tougher than I remember. But it also makes me wish the scissors were a weapon you could have. It'd be so cool, man. I should upgrade my HP, definitely. I was thinking about this when I was playing as the alternate universe character, but that alternate universe character, like with what, like 32 or 34 HP, has so much more HP than my current character, which is 25. Yeah, you really feel it. It's kind of wild that all these guys aggro instantly together. I guess it's because they're all just working on cutting trees, so as soon as one of them gets interrupted, they all kind of chain aggro together. They're pretty together. They're pretty strong, but they're pretty frail. They react to every attack. But I believe they don't have much stagger resist. So that's one way to be able to take care of them. That they but so even my meager weapon, the S-Stock, which does not do a lot of stagger damage, is able to stagger these guys, which is useful for me, obviously. Another thing I like about this this expansion, this DLC, and something I also like about Dark Garden, is that it uses these white flowers to sort of these shiny white flowers to kind of disorient the player, because the player is gonna think, oh well, there's an item over there, there's an item over there, there's an item over there, but they're not items. They're just these flowers. Careful here. I'm hearing footsteps. Take that. Once again, I very much appreciate the lack of music in Dark Souls. The fact that every sound you hear, for the most part, except for the music, sometimes is diegetic. So it really gives you that sense of atmosphere, and I appreciate it here because hearing the wind howling like this when there's like a giant chasm, it's logical, the wind's howling through the chasm, but also I think if you listen closely, you can hear like breathing from the abyss. It's very spooky. The sound design in Dark Souls is actually really good. I don't know, good is maybe not the right word, because I think the sounds are often pretty basic and pretty generic, and I think a lot of them come from audio banks because I've heard them in other things. Like the parry sound in Dark Souls and in Bloodborne, a critical attack sound in Bloodborne is actually, I heard it in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like the anime adaptation of it. So that's pretty, that was pretty wild for me, hearing that while watching the anime after having played hours upon hours upon hours of these games, and getting to hear the sound effects in JoJo was quite a strange thing. But it's not necessarily that the sounds are good, though I do think they are good. But it's also very much so that the sounds are well used. The sounds that the game does have are well used. That's more so how I feel. For example, even the most generic kind of raspy breathing sound can be scary if used in the right context, where, for example, maybe you hear it when you don't expect to hear it.
Let me guess. Snatched by a shadowy limb and dragged off to the past?
That's exactly correct.
Yes, of course. Exactly what happened to me. We are both strangers in this strange land. But at least now there are two of us. Did you happen across Knight Artorias? The legendary abyss walker from the old tales? Well, if you haven't, it's just as well. He's a colorless sort, if you ask me. So, what did that giant mushroom make you do? Not that I care. It's none of my business. I've little to talk about, really. Oh, you know me. What do I know?
So this is Marvelous Chester. Marvelous Chester is
So long.
probably a character from further into the time than we are. His clothes seem too well made to be in the same time as us. Some people say he was supposed to be a hint that Bloodborne was going to be a thing. Like, there's this NPC who dresses kind of like, I guess, a little bit like Victorian clothes-ish, like more gothic kind of stuff. Not medieval, so it's like, oh well, he's like a teaser for Bloodborne. I don't know if I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that's true. It's true that he's out of place, but I think he's just meant to be a. He's meant to be a like a time traveler like you, like some unwitting time traveler like you, and the fact that he's dressed in like these more modern clothes is just supposed to be like to show that people are being dragged out from many points in time, not just from your point in time. You're not the only person who's suffered this fate. Now, what does it add to the experience that there's another guy from another time? I'm not too sure. I think it's just to show that it's very unstable and that it kind of pulls anybody out. So we have a boss fight coming up against Sir Artorias, the Abyss Walker. It's a very fun boss fight, potentially a boss fight that I think has done more harm than good to the Soul series, but it's a matter of opinion, I suppose. But the reason I say this is because it's a really great boss fight that showcases a lot of good things about Dark Souls. Namely the combat system and how it's positioning based and timing based, and how a lot of it, if you read the animations, you can make out pretty well how everything is gonna go, and there's a lot we want to be quick here. That's the name of the game. I want to be quick. Problem is my big hat is too big. There we go. We're quick now that we don't have our rapier anymore. The boss fight gets to showcase you making it feels like a dance, just like I talked about the Sanctuary Guardian. It's positioning based. A lot of moves can be avoided just by moving. You don't need to roll. And when you do roll, a lot of the times, oh my god, a lot of the time the rolls feel more like it's rolls to reposition yourself, not necessarily to abuse invincibility frames, though that's definitely something you can do. Abusing invincibility frames, I want to get in there with as much HP as I can, that's important. Yeah, there we go. And the fact that the fight feels like a dance is very good. The fact that the fight lets you reposition and use positioning to your advantage is very good. The fact that the enemy is very aggressive and therefore you have to find openings to fight him, but he's very aggressive in the same way that the Sanctuary Guardian is, where he's aggressive because he responds to what you do, not because he's always attacking. Though with his speed, sometimes it feels like he's always attacking, because the Dark Souls character is not that fast. So having to deal with a character who is way quicker and has a lot more movement potential than you do, whereas you have very deliberate, slow animations and movement. It really feels like a test of skill in the best way possible. And you'll get to see what I mean once we fight Artorias. But the problem is that people... Well, the problem... People love the boss so much. There was such a good reception to the boss and to bosses of this type that when you know, Dark Souls 2 came out, a lot of people said, well, why aren't the bosses more like Dark Souls 2 bosses? So that was the first thing. Why aren't more Dark Souls 2 bosses like Artorias? That's one thing. People were complaining about gimmick bosses, like, oh, this boss is a gimmick boss. The boss we'll go down this path later. The boss is you know, it's unfun, or it's like it's a gimmick, like all you have to do is solve this puzzle, and as soon as you solve the puzzle the boss is really easy. Or oh, I have to you know, this boss is it's meant to be like a one-on-one encounter with no gimmicks, but the moveset is just too bland or whatever. Like, what I like about Dark Souls bosses and Dark Souls combat and encounters is that they evoke many different emotions and many different thoughts in the player, because there's many ways you can solve them, there's many ways you can go through certain things, and you know, sometimes they create this sense of panic, they create this sense of having a nice, you know, back and forth against another brave knight. You know, sometimes they have a sense of dread and horror to them, sometimes it's disgust. Sometimes it's you know, like Maiden Astray and Demon Souls, it makes you wonder, like, oh, am I really doing the right thing here? Like, it almost feels like you're the boss and that they're trying to defeat you. All these different emotions that the boss is evoking you is very good, and that's one thing I appreciate a lot about Dark Souls. But then, because of Artorias' success, a lot of the boss fights have become these epic duels against powerful, quick opponents with flashy moves, and it has made it so now you don't have that many bosses that evoke different emotions. They all evoke the same kind of emotion, which is this intense, panicked combat situation that feels like a dance, with a great payoff at the end, because you're like, oh, I finally did it. So anyway, here's Artorias. Oh my god, it's just like in Berserk. So, yeah, I'm just getting my ass beat right now. He has a lot of ways to reorient himself, which I really like. He reorients himself with attacks, he reorients himself with rolls. It's very good, very nice. And I like that he doesn't talk, even though he's a important figure in the story and the lore, and he's supposed to be this valiant knight. He doesn't talk much, and one thing I liked about this fight is that he doesn't talk at all. He just makes noises, and you could say maybe it's because he's lost his mind to the abyss, which is potentially very true. But beyond that, it's also that what I like this move, because if you get hit by the first one, it does a lot of damage, but the subsequent ones don't do that much damage, because there's no way for you to get out. So the fact that they if he runs away like that, that usually means he tries to buff himself, but you can break him out of it. But I don't do enough poise damage to break him out of it, sadly. I don't attack fast enough, and I don't do enough poise damage. So now he's buffed. He does more damage and he takes less damage, and I think his attacks have a little bit more area of effect. Yeah, one thing that's cool about Artorias is that he used to have lines, I believe. They're still in the game's files, if I'm not mistaken. But I actually think it, and he warns you, like, you know, if you have any sense of like justice about yourself, you should destroy the abyss after you defeat me, and something like that. And I believe he also starts to go mad, and he starts like talking, not go mad, but like he starts to think about his life, and he like apologizes to the people that he's gonna leave behind after he dies, and also the fact that he's kind of lost himself. But anyway, the fact there's all these lines that got cut, and I actually like that he stays silent and stoic the entire time. It actually makes the player project a lot more emotion onto Artorias. You kind of get to decide how he feels about the whole situation and how he is. It really lets the player kind of guide their own experience beyond just like just fighting Artorias. The game doesn't tell you how to feel about Artorias. You get to decide how you feel about Artorias based on what's presented to you. You know, you could say that maybe if they made him too heroic, or too like he was too sad or too depressing when you talk to him, that it would make you feel bad about killing him. But if they made him just full on crazy, then maybe you wouldn't feel bad about killing him. So now there's like this ambiguity, and beyond the ambiguity, there's also just the fact that it makes him way cooler and more mysterious because he doesn't talk. And I want you to pay attention to his moves. Because Artorias has a lot of moves that Sif, which is a boss we'll fight later, he has a lot of moves that Sif uses. Because Sif is his trusty wolf companion, and they use the same weapon. I love that move. The one where he throws slime. It's like a shoulder check where he throws slime. It's like it does not that much damage, but it staggers you, and it's just a way for him to let you keep your distance a little bit. Oh, I love that move. I also like that even though he has one arm, he's still like kicking your ass. Yeah, I can't deal enough poise damage. It's been like my #1 main problem this entire run. That the S-Talk does not attack quickly enough or do enough stagger damage to stagger enemies. I've had this problem where, you know, when I fought Priscilla, it turns out that Priscilla, she's invisible, but she loses the invisibility when you stagger her. But I couldn't stagger her because I was using this weapon. So she basically spent the entire fight invisible, and I thought something was wrong. Usually he does more than one, but I don't know why my character didn't roll. It might be because I queued another action due to what do you call it? Due to the input queuing or whatever it's called. I'm gonna try to use Velka's rapier instead. It's a little bit faster. Maybe I'll be able to stagger Artorias. That means Crystal Magic Weapon is useless now, so we're gonna give ourselves a different spell. Something like... a Great Heavy Soul Arrow, which has does a lot of stagger damage. But yeah, as you can see, you know, Artorias has a lot of nice moves, and the fight really feels like a fair back and forth. It's something I really like in games in general, especially in games that are more skill-based and less, you know, numbers-based, like a JRPG, for example. But even in a JRPG, it can be really fun. It's when enemies, you feel like the enemies are able to use the same tactics as you, and they're able to use the same kind of, they have the same kind of skill set as you. Like sometimes, you know, the difference between a PvP encounter and a boss fight is just like an NPC fight and a boss fight is just a few moves and like a few numbers being tweaked. Like if Artorias had like half as many moves, he could just be and less health obviously. He could just be a strong mini boss, or like a strong enemy you fight in the field. But because he has a big HP and he has more moves, and his moves are pretty complex, oh my god, I do no damage. I think I don't know if he's resistant to magic, but I feel like my magic has not done much damage to him. Yeah. Oh, that slime move, so cool. I wish I could throw slime out of my broken, corrupted arm. Oops. Oops. See, this move, where he like follows up a swipe attack with a overhead slam. It's pretty smart because I feel like the usual instinct of a player when they play Dark Souls is to roll backwards, not necessarily roll sideways or yeah, it's a roll sideways. So the fact that to roll backwards, so the fact that if you roll backwards, he just hits you with the overhead slam because it goes really far because he has a long sword. It really messes you up, and I appreciate that. It's the same way that the Sanctuary Guardian, follows up the Wind Blast with either a charge or a Lightning Blast, depending on how far away you are from it. I guess if you want to give a downside, is that the Sanctuary Guardian and Artorias are both kind of dance-like fights that are both very dynamic and have to do with like finding openings and staying on your toes and everything. That it could feel, pardon me, I had a weird like yawn burp. It could feel almost samey, like two fights like that are like that back to back. But the thing is, I think Artorias also serves as one of those emotional boss fights, not just a skill-based boss fight. Like Sanctuary Guardian, there's no context. Just you get there, and as soon as you get there, you fight the Sanctuary Guardian, and it's this really tricky fight. Artorias, there's like context. There's a lot of lore, there's a lot of things going on, and then when you reach him, he's like this corrupted, mute. His arm's broken. He's like a monster. It's hard to tell what's going on, but the Valiant Knight has clearly failed in holding back the Abyss. I think to have an opening so I can buff my weapon. I wanted to roll, but I didn't roll. It makes me wonder why sometimes I roll and sometimes I don't. It's probably the input buffering. I probably don't even need to roll for that attack. I probably just can just move sideways. If you stay close, you're usually pretty good. And I think you can abuse because the other thing that's cool about Artorias that I really like is that he doesn't have too much tracking on his moves. So if you move out of the way, you're usually safe. Okay, the attack has a big enough slam that you do get hit even if you move sideways. That's good to know. That's good to know. I thought you could avoid it by moving sideways. Maybe if you moved sideways, you started moving sideways a little bit earlier, you'd be able to avoid it. But there's a kind of a AoE around it, so maybe that's why you get hit. Because it's clearly not the tracking, because the sword hit like next to me, didn't hit on me, but there's clearly like a visual sign that there's some sort of like chaos energy coming out, or like some kind of slam energy, because he slams it so hard that you get hit even if you're next to the sword. I think, if there hadn't been that little particle effect going on, I would feel a bit more like it was unfair. Like, oh man, he hit me and I was, you know, his sword didn't collide with me. But in this case, it feels like it belongs there. And that's something else that I think a lot of games do a lot. Dark Souls, you know, despite its very janky hitboxes at times, has pretty good hitboxes for the most part. With how complex some of the animations are and how like how much movement there is and everything. Like sometimes it's a wonder that so many moves behave properly on both the player and the enemy's part. But you know, one bad hitbox always kind of ruins the thing. So people tend to remember the times where hitboxes were weird or didn't work instead of the times when all the times that they behaved correctly. But that's something else that I kind of appreciate about Dark Souls, is that for the most part it doesn't rely too much on area of effect attacks and like on big explosions or things like that. It tends to have very kind of precise moves. So when bosses do have area of effect attacks, it tends to be very dangerous. They don't tend to have that many. They tend to have only a few area of effect attacks, and it kind of stands out when they do, and it's like a particular threat. Like, oh, you have to be careful about the particle effects, not particle effects, but the area of effects. And in the case of Artorias, you know, because the chaos corruption that he leaves everywhere, you're kind of more forgiving if he does have. Oh my god. I dodge into him instead of dodging away from him. I feel like maybe it's just because like this fight is basically testing Dark Souls for all it's worth, but sometimes it feels like the game is not responsive enough for what I'm trying to do. And to be fair, I am playing the game on a 60 FPS version that's not even supposed to run at 60 FPS, so I think sometimes it loses inputs. And it really makes me wonder, like, because I remember I played this at 30 FPS back in the day. It makes me wonder, like, how I was even able to play at 30 FPS, because I feel like there's a lot of, you know, you want things to be very responsive in an action game, especially if it's skill-based and timing-based and movement-based. So it makes me wonder how I used to do this at 30 FPS. Now that I'm like struggling at 60 FPS, and I wish it was even more responsive. But I also think that it's possible that because of the mod I'm using and how it like kind of forces the game to run at 60 FPS, and it creates like janky collisions, and sometimes you might lose input. It's very possible. It's also possible that I just think I'm bad. I think I'm losing inputs because I'm just bad and I'm not reacting fast enough, and that I'm just bad. It's also possible that my controller's getting old or dirty, and that the buttons all crusted up. I love that attack. I love a lot of his attacks. He has a lot of very good, like, moves. He moves in like good ways. The fact that he slides around, like, you could say it's a little bit like he has move assist in a way where like it creates tracking, but it doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere, because he leaves like slime on the ground, and so you could say like, oh yeah, he's sliding on the slime. Yeah, this attack you can't. Well, I'm gonna let him do it because I have no chance. I'm gonna buff myself. I think he's a bit faster too when he does that. I'm not talking because I'm concentrating, because he is tough. Like I said, I think he's testing Dark Souls for all it's worth. Speed-wise, complexity of moveset-wise. You know, he basically is. Oh my god, he does a lot of damage when he's buffed. It's basically the Dark Souls team showing off what they've learned and how good they've gotten at developing stuff in their engine. I can get him. I just don't have a lot of health, and my weapon apparently sucks at. Because like, the you could say theoretically that the boss fight is designed around. The boss fight is designed around. Let me check something. Yeah, I have like no upgrade materials. You could say that the boss fight is designed around exploiting his buffing period to deal a shit ton of damage and stagger him. However, so far, I don't know if it's just me being terrible, but it seems like it's impossible for me to stagger him with my current weapon. I'd have to try more, but it feels weird that like this mechanic that I usually use all the time in the boss fight that makes it significantly easier, because you could say that like that's the one big opening Artorias gives you, and it's a big punish. Like, yes, he buffs himself a lot. He buffs himself a lot, but it's also like it leaves him wide open, and if you manage to punish it appropriately, he can't even. He even gets like a pretty big stagger. So I think the fact that that thing, which is clearly Artorias' weak point, maybe depending on what weapon you use, you can't even exploit that weak point. It makes it feel very it makes the boss fight significantly harder, because it makes you feel like you have to whittle his health down. Oh my god. The other thing is like, I'm playing this right now. I haven't played Elden Ring in like a year and a half. I haven't played Dark Souls 3 in more than a year and a half. There's a lot of like faster games I haven't played in a long time. So Dark Souls right now feels like it's as fast as it's ever been. It makes you wonder like, oh my god, how do you even keep up with everything in like Elden Ring and in Dark Souls 3? Because those games are so quick and the enemies are so fast in that game. And I find it pretty funny because I know that like, Artorias, oh my god, his sword has so much range and I always forget. Because you have like these you have like these baked in like panic things that you do where you don't think about it, you just start panicking and then you roll backwards. But rolling backwards is a terrible idea in this fight. But yeah, like it makes you wonder like how the hell do you keep up with how the hell do I keep up with these things in Elden Ring and in Dark Souls 3? But Artorias is so slow compared to characters in that game, so there's a difference in design. But in Dark Souls 3 and in Elden Ring, you can roll a lot more, and enemies, while way faster and more aggressive, they also, I think, are designed more with invincibility frames in mind and less with blocking and positioning in mind. And also, just overall, I also think that in those games, the character rolls faster, so you can chain more rolls in a row in a shorter span of time to avoid these super quick things. I'm not sure. Like I said, I haven't played faster games in Dark Souls in a long time, but right now I feel outsped in every way, and I think that's how you're supposed to feel. And I also think that's why Artorias is like the only boss that's like this in the game, except for maybe Sentry Guardian and maybe Sif, but even then Sif is much bigger and has much more telegraphed slow attacks. But yeah, like I like that everything feels so fast compared to you, because Dark Souls 1, despite what people might say, the combat is very simple and the combat is very slow. You might not feel that way when you play the game a lot, but it is a slow game. Yeah, I can block that swipe. I always forget that blocking is an option in Dark Souls, especially because I feel like this game was very much designed with blocking in mind. You know what? No, bad idea. He started his animation way after I should. way after it would have been feasible for me to, like, logically attack him. Oh my god. He should lose his buff pretty soon, if I'm not mistaken. Dun, dun. I really like the music too. It has that sense of like heroism, but it also has a kind of a darkness to it that makes you kind of mourn for Artorias. Yeah, I'm gonna buff myself to Artorias. We're just gonna keep fighting mano a mano like this. Oh god. Oh god. I should have rolled sideways. But the panic makes you roll backwards. At least it makes me roll backwards. Here, you know, I kind of wish I had had more opportunities to make him to attack him while he was buffing himself. But every time he started, while he had a good opening for it, so I never got to see if I could actually stagger him. It's fun, you know. It's one of those bosses where you almost don't want to beat him because you just want to keep fighting him because he's so fun. But I need to get this over with, you know. I have we're running a tight schedule here. Kos is gonna wake up. Kos and Mips are gonna wake up any second, and then I'll have to play with them. Well, all I know and all I'm realizing playing this is that as much as I like the S-Stock in Dark Souls 1 and in its sequels and successors, the S-Stock maybe is not the best weapon in the game. I usually use the Baldur's Side Sword or other kind of fast but agile weapons. But the Baldur's Side Sword did not drop on this run, so I'm not using it. And also, you know, I love the S-Stock so much in Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 and in Elden Ring. And I like piercing weapons a lot in Demon Souls, so I wanted to try out the S-Stock in this game, which is a weapon that I usually use, but I use early game and I end up kind of replacing it with different weapons later on. But here I never replace it, and makes me wish I did a little bit. It's crazy to think that, you know, Artorias was considered like a very anime-like boss fight because of how like agile and flashy his moves are. But you compare anything Artorias does to anything that the bosses in the later games do, and he just feels so like limp. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if I was able to get my running attack on him and do the like where it hits twice, it would work pretty well as an opener. But I always miss my my running attack when he's doing this. I got hit. I'm dead. Yeah, I don't know, S-Talk. I don't know if your stagger damage sucks ass. I don't know how else to say it. I did not expect that this would be my... I did not expect that my lack of stagger damage would be my #1 undoing in this in this entire run of Dark Souls. It made me have a really bad time against Priscilla, and it's making me have a bad time against Artorias. Just goes to show that the game has more complexity under the hood than you might think. You know, I always kind of took stagger damage for granted, because I always use weapons that have like a good amount of stagger damage, or like even if they don't have that good amount of stagger damage, at least they have like a quick attack speed to make up for it. But the S-Stock so far has been a pretty slow weapon with low stagger damage, and it's been messing me up, and it's something I never thought would actually happen. Makes you wonder, you know, I don't use heavy weapons that much, but it makes you wonder how the game with heavy weapons is, because you stagger very easily but you attack so slowly. Yeah, the weapons are pretty well fine-tuned. I actually, you know, wish I could showcase more the differences between all the weapons, but the upgrade materials in this game are a little bit more few and far between, so you tend to stick to one weapon for the most part, unlike in the other games where I think they go a little bit more willy-nilly with their upgrades. He's gonna do it again? Is he gonna do it again? I tried to dodge, but it didn't work. Didn't work, but I was gonna run out of stamina, so even if I tried to spam my attacks, I knew it would have gone to nowhere. It's tricky. I can never tell how many slam attacks he's gonna do, and it makes me wish I could punish him, but it's so risky to try punishing the slam attack, because if you punish wrong, he just does another slam, and then you get caught into this into multi-slam. Like here he did 2 slams, and earlier he only did 1 slam, and there was no... I have no idea how I was supposed to tell between the 2 different multi-slam, between the single slam and the multi-slam. Like here he did single, but there was no... I didn't know... but it keeps you guessing, which I appreciate. But at the same time, it's good when there's like tells and there's like consistency and things like that. I don't know why I unequipped my weapon. Nope. Maybe one more hit would have done it, but I didn't want to risk it. Time for the... I'm a mage after all. I may be fighting a wizard. I may be fighting a knight, but I'm a mage. It's also something else that I appreciate about the Artorias boss fight, because it's something that I think they end up overdoing in the other games, is that Artorias is a single phase. He doesn't change his moveset as the fight goes on, and he doesn't buff himself, you know, like, he doesn't buff himself halfway through to become like permanently stronger for the rest of the fight, you know. He has a, like, one consistent moveset the entire way through. And it just depends on how you Yeah, it just has one consistent moveset the entire way through, and the buff is a self-imposed. It's a self-imposed buff that he loses over time gradually, which I think is very cool because it means that it's really about learning the moveset, but it's also, you know, what you see is what you get, and what you get is so good already that you don't need to try to make it better by semi-fucked. Yeah, I was hoping you would leave me an opening, but it was a risk I was willing to take. I think with less messing around in the first phase of the fight, not first phase, but like in the first part of the fight where I like unequipped my weapon randomly a bunch for some reason, and you know, I wasn't as aggressive as I could have been. I think I could have defeated him, but we're getting there. You know, I'm slowly but surely getting in the zone, and I need to pee, but I don't know if it's better for me to pee and feel relaxed or not pee and have that like urgency of needing to pee and playing better as a result. But yeah, the fact that what you see is what you get, and what you get is already good. You know, I wonder how another phase could have, if another phase is necessary, would have made things better. You could say like maybe he starts off with like a, like you could say like 2/3 of his moveset, and then the second half of the fight, you know, he has his complete moveset. But I think that it would make the first part of the fight less complex, and it would make Artorias feel less skilled. It would make it less impactful, because like right now he's like, you know, you start the fight and he starts off so tricky to defeat, but once you figure him out, that's who he is, that's how he is. You know, there's no actually the Abyss is taking over and now he's turning into like some sort of monster, or like, oh, now that the Abyss is like fully taken over his body, now he has like I don't know, like you know, he spits more juice out after every attack, which is something that Dark Souls 3 would have done, honestly. Dark Souls 3, you know, it has that thing where when the bosses get embered, they start to do like fire attacks, or like every attack has like a trail of fire behind it, or like every attack has like fire AoEs. Which is like, it fits with the game thematically, I get that, but it's more so the fact that like almost every boss in Dark Souls 3 has like multiple phases, even if it's not like actually multiple phases in the fact they don't transform, or like their moveset doesn't change necessarily like super significantly. They still have like a slight buff where like, oh, maybe their attacks do a little bit more damage on the second phase, or oh, maybe you know, they have a little bit more AoEs on the second phase, or something like that. Damn it. This attack is really killer. I feel like when he's not buffed, he uses it less often to punish you, but when he's buffed, he uses it all the time to punish you. I didn't know you could buff while buffing. I'll take that to my advantage. I feel like last time I was able to, I had the perfect timing on his roll, so I was able to exploit every roll, but this time no such case. The panic backwards roll. Okay, yeah, I need to pee really bad. My hubris. You know, I thought to myself, oh, I'll open up Dark Souls. We'll get to Artorias, defeat Artorias real quick, and we'll just make it like a shorter episode where the showcase of the episode is Artorias, and I just get to talk about Artorias, and you know, quick 1 hour episode. And now here we are, a bit longer than an hour in. Still toughing it out against our friend Artorias of the Abyss. But I guess it lets me talk about boss design again. I appreciate that he has a boss run. Even if you can skip all the enemies and just kind of run, and there's a little shortcut, I still appreciate that there's a boss run. because it gives you that kind of clarity on the way to the boss. Makes you think about your mistakes, makes you think about what you did, makes you think about how you want to approach him, if you want to change your tactics and stuff. Also lets you kind of wind down a little bit, because if you just sometimes, you know, it's probably happened to you. You keep dying over and over again to a boss, so you get frustrated and you start to lose your composure and you suck. Whereas having a boss run like this, it lets you kind of wind down. It's something that I kind of don't like about Elden Ring and about Dark Souls 3, to a certain extent, and to a certain extent Bloodborne in some cases, is that I find that the bosses are often too close to the bonfire, and for the convenience of the player, and then it makes it so you end up kind of just bashing your head against the wall against the boss with no clarity of mind in between. And also, there's a bit less punishment for dying to a boss. 'Cause, like, to me, a boss run is a form of punishment, because it's like, while you died against the boss, you don't get to retry right away. You kind of here you get to waste your time a little bit. Some people might disagree with me. They might say, "Oh, well, it sucks," but that's the point, right? You need to be punished for losing. Alright, Torius, roll away, do your thing. I used to be so good at this boss fight that I used to do this boss fight just for fun. You know, I was like, oh, just a quick Artorias. I had like a bunch of characters that were just at Artorias because I just wanted to fight him all the time because I like him so much. No, I'm old and my reflexes aren't as good. And I'm using the S-Talk. Not that the S-Talk is bad. It's actually a great weapon, I love it. It has a good moveset, and the running attack is dynamite. No! I knew that was coming. I got greedy a little bit. I felt like I wasn't doing enough damage, so I tried to get a little bit more in. I was like, man, this fight's been going on for a while, and he's only at half health. Yeah, maybe poise would be useful, actually. Not getting staggered by some of his weaker attacks. I also have the tin crystallization catalyst, but I can't use it. I don't have enough. Yeah, I don't have enough intelligence to use the tin crystallization catalyst. Maybe if I did, I could have like super strong spells and it'd make me so much stronger. We'll see, we'll see. We shouldn't change tactics. Our tactics are clearly working. I'm just too shitty to consistently execute them. But I'm really surprised, usually I get to Artorias and I'm like, man, I'm dealing too much damage, he's gonna go down too easily and it's gonna be disappointing. But this time I'm doing like not as much damage as I thought I would. I mean, the damage I'm doing is not insignificant. I'm at like 263, and when I buff it with the Crystal Magic Weapon, it's more significant. But it makes me feel, it makes me wonder, maybe if you can't spam projectiles, int is kind of not as good as I remember. Like the hybrid int and dex, where you buff your weapons using your spells to then use a dex build, which is how I like to play the later games. Because I find that oftentimes if you play mostly with projectiles, you're kind of like losing out a little bit, because I feel like despite the prevalence of optional usage of projectiles, and even like them encouraging you to use like you know, intelligence builds or bow builds or things like that, like a lot of the, yeah, look at that, I was able to take a hit and I didn't get staggered, but kind of messed up my timing a little bit. I got to heal. Oh man, if I could use sweeps more, it'd be so good. Yeah, that extra poise is coming in handy. I don't get sunlocked as much. Oops. This attack you can punish a lot, but I'm gonna use it to buff. Yeah, see, I attacked him with all I could, and he still got the buff. So I don't know what they expect of a halberd user. Not halberd, S-Stock. What's a poor S-Stock user like me supposed to do, Miyazaki? Oh god. What you're about to see, do not do this at home. This is goddamn it. I attacked him with everything I had and he didn't get staggered. That kind of sucks. I tried. If I kept, I wanted to, like, you know, if I keep going, maybe I'll be able to. If I keep going, maybe I'll be able to stagger him. But even that very last hit, I was sure of it. I was like, "There's no way," but yeah, you got staggered. I don't know the exact numbers. Like, I don't know, like, oh, maybe he has 180 poise and I'm do like 10 poise per hit, so I would need to hit him 18 times, which I think is a bit excessive. I don't think that's the case, but if I had to guess, it's probably one more hit than what I was able to do to him, which still sucks, because I don't know if I would have been able to do one more hit. You know, well, I mean, clearly I wasn't able to. I was just spamming attacks. I guess that's the downside of rust weapons like this, is that they don't do that much stagger damage. I mean, they have a long reach, so I can understand that there has to be like downsides. I like the breathing when you get it here. Very ominous. I like that that double sweep that he does, because if you get caught by it, if you dodge it, you dodge the first hit, but you get hit by the second one, which I really like, because It means that you can't just blindly dodge to everything he does. You have to be like, you have to think about how you're dodging, where you're dodging, and what you're doing. Man, that I've been getting punished like crazy this fight. Get out of here, boys. Oh damn. Yeah, growl at me. Even with trying heavy attacks, it didn't work. So I don't know, boss. I don't know if the S-Stock is a good weapon after all, boss. Seems to me like there's some janky shit going on with the S-Stock, boss. One last chance for me and for old Artie over here. Being able to resist some hits with the poise and also having more consistent usage of my buff. Oh my god, I got killed by the slime attack. I got greedy. But yeah, having more consistent use of my my buff definitely helped. I was able to keep up the damage. Man. Oh man, what's going on? It seems I've encountered a time skip of some sorts. My stand, Kim Crimson, has activated a time skip, and now we're in the future, and we've skipped every single event that has happened. Are only left with the effect, but the cause has disappeared. So yeah, what happened was last time I recorded during a storm. The winds caused me to lose power because I think it damaged a power line somewhere. So I ended up well, the recording stopped, and I ended up playing with Kos, having a grand old time. Because anyway, after that last attempt against Artorias, I had maybe one more attempt, and then Kos woke up. But that attempt was horrible, and Kos waking up, you know, it just oh yeah, we're getting back into Dark Souls instantly, getting demolished by these gardeners. But yeah, I experienced a time dilation, time skip. So now what ended up happening is I have the Baldur's Sight Sword, which is my favorite weapon in this game. I love the moveset, these nice wide sweeps. It has a thrust, whoop, and in the one-handed form, it also has a wide sweeps and a thrust, and it's a rather quick thrust, and the weapon's pretty fast, pretty good range. It does good does good at dexterity scaling, so it does good damage, and I can buff it with crystal magic weapons. So I think we're gonna get some pretty good results here against Artorias. But it's also been like a bit more than a week since I recorded the last session during the storm, so we'll see if you know, I'm rusty and everything. But for the most part, I think it's gonna go pretty well with this weapon that I know very well. A lot of my Dark Souls runs use this weapon because I just love it so much. I never tire of it. You know, in this past week, people have been talking about the Elden Ring DLC, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I haven't played the DLC yet. I haven't played Elden Ring in a long time because I want to beat Dark Souls 1 first for this playthrough over here, because I don't want to play Elden Ring and Dark Souls 1 concurrently, because they feel so different to play. I'd rather be fully immersed in Dark Souls 1 so that when I go back to Elden Ring, I can really tell the difference. That way I go into it with a clearer mind, and I'm able to analyze it more clearly. Now, I don't think I'm gonna do a series on it. It's for my own purposes, you know. I'd like to analyze it more clearly. And people have been saying that the DLC is too difficult, and that the game feels like you're moving at Dark Souls speed, but you're fighting Sekiro speed bosses. But I find that hard to believe, honestly, to be quite real with you, as the kids would say, because the speed of Dark Souls compared to the speed of something like Sekiro and Dark Souls 3 is very, very significantly different, I would say. And Elden Ring is extremely fast. You know, Elden Ring is so fast, in fact, and your character is so fast in Elden Ring, in fact, that I would say that you would actually... Artorias would be considered a mid/low tier boss in terms of speed and difficulty in something like the Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring. I mean, look at the what are they called? The Abyss Watchers in Dark Souls 3. The Abyss Watchers are pretty easy, and they're made difficult by having a gimmick of there being multiple Abyss Watchers. But they fight like Artorias. They have a similar moveset to Artorias. And yeah, they have a similar moveset to Artorias. And the other way that they differentiate themselves is that in their second phase they do they have like trails that surround their attacks, and they have like area effects, and like their attacks are delayed a bit, because like they attack once and then the trail that follows their attack will attack a second time behind them. And people consider the Abyss Watchers to be a very good fight, but they consider it to be too easy. And it's because they fight like a slightly sped up Artorias with an even more anime moveset, you could say. And you know, it's not that hard. Whereas in you know, Dark Souls 1, you could say Artorias is like the summum of the difficulty. Maybe Manus is harder, but Manus is a different kind of difficulty. Manus is it's about dealing with many things at once. You know, Manus is about dealing with his projectiles. It's about dealing with his aggressive, like how aggressive he is. You know, it's about there's a lot of things going on with Manus. He's also very big, and I would say Manus is actually a very good caster boss fight. Manus being a caster who you know, he uses his dark magic spells a lot. It's a really dynamic boss fight, and it's very dynamic and dangerous in a different way from Artorias. But anyway, to go back to what people have to say about Elden Ring, beyond just people saying that you know, oh, I feel so slow when I play Elden Ring and the bosses are so fast, like I need to have the parry mechanic from Sekiro or something, like, or I need to be even faster to compensate for how fast the bosses are. I find that to be a bit fallacious, because if you compare the Demon Souls to Dark Souls, you are infinitely faster. But also, oh my god, beyond that, you know, to make up for how aggressive the bosses are in Elden Ring offers you a lot of options in combat, both you know, for fighting and for defense. You know, shields now have like a shield breaking mechanic, or like guard breaking. I forget what it's called exactly. I don't know how the mechanic works, but I think you can stagger enemies, because you can punish them if they attack your shield too much and you have enough stamina to like do certain things. You can do jump attacks, which do a ridiculous amount of stagger. You can jump, which lets you jump over certain attacks. Your dodging is really, really, really strong and really, really fast, and you can dodge a lot more without running out of stamina. And just beyond that too, there's Ashes of War, which are like unique abilities that you can attach to weapons and to other things. And the Ashes of War, you know, there's some defensive ones and there's some offensive ones, and it's they're both very welcome in combat. You know, oh my god, or it's just you scared me, man. And you know, I just feel like people ignore all the mechanic, and not to also make light of all the fact that you can summon NPCs, the fact that you can summon like ashen bell summons or whatever they're called, where you can summon like the jellyfish, or you can summon the you know, like Black Knight Tish or whatever she's called. Like all these like ash summons you can do, plus all the ash summons, plus the NPC summons, plus all the Ashes of War, plus the jumping mechanics, plus the jumping attacks, plus, you know, there's so much ways that you can counteract how aggressive the bosses are in Elden Ring. I don't understand why people are complaining about difficulty. But then again, I haven't played the DLC, so maybe the DLC throws that out the window. And it's just really difficult for difficulty's sake, and even all these extra tools they give to the player are not enough to compensate for it, which is very possible, and that maybe that's why people are complaining. But to me, you know, I always thought the success, like explosive success of Elden Ring was due to the fact that it was, well, one, it was an open world game, and open world games are very trendy and popular, but two, also I would say that the Elden Ring is a how do you say this? It's the most forgiving and customizable experience out of all the mainstream modern From Software games. Like I would say Sekiro is pretty punishing, because in Sekiro, you know, you can't level up really, and you only have one weapon, so and there's no summons, so you can't really like rely on an OP weapon, or you can't rely on like summoning people to help you, and you can't rely on like bashing your head against a wall and just grinding levels to become stronger so that you can like steamroll a boss. But then again, also Sekiro has what I would call a non-context sensitive parry, where you can parry at any time, and as long as you're within the allotted range for parrying, you will take no damage and parry their attack, which makes it so it's very forgiving and very like timing based, but the timing is very loose, and you can be very sloppy and still do extremely well in Sekiro. And I don't like that kind of stuff, because it removes all form of thought behind the positioning and behind careful consideration and pacing of fights. Even though it is very satisfying, and the fact that the mechanics are kind of the fact that the mechanics are built around that is very good. But the fact that like I said, it basically ignores the fact that it ignores positioning. To me, it's a bit sad, you know. Yo, it's crazy. You stagger Artorias with 3 hits with this weapon, whereas with my other weapon, like 5 hits wasn't enough. Crazy shit, man. Crazy shit. Goes. That's right. I'm fighting Artorias and I'm talking about video games. You know it well. You know, Kosi likes Kosi's a big fan of Demon Souls. Every time I play Demon Souls, Kosi's like transfixed by my screen. And I get it, you know, Demon Souls has this very unique look and feel and flavor to it that no other game compares to, except maybe Dark Souls 1. I have to stay close, because if he decides to buff himself, he hasn't been doing many multi somersaults, or whatever you want to call it, multi flips with the slam. 1, 2, 3. One thing I like about also about Dark Souls in general, and I'm gonna compare it to Monster Hunter again, because I love Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter doesn't have health bars, which I like, but in Dark Souls, you know, you don't know how much hits it takes to stagger an enemy. But if you use your weapon often, and you fight the same kinds of enemies often, and you find the same boss often, you end up having this thing where you know approximately how many hits it takes to stagger something, just based on feel, and then you can kind of extrapolate, like, okay, so this enemy is bigger than the previous enemy I was fighting, so probably if I fight it, it'll take, you know, 4 hits to stagger instead of 3, because the last enemy took 3. So you can kind of start to make judgment calls, and it gives a lot of player freedom. Not freedom because you feel like you can reliably predict certain things, and having information, and information being like a gateway to doing well in a game is something that I really like. That's why I like Demon's Souls so much, and why I like Dark Souls 1 so much, is that I feel like a lot of the boss fights are about information and knowing how to approach what they're doing. I wanted to let the Artorias' scream play out without talking over it, because it's one of my favorite sound effects in the entire game. When Artorias screams, it's very human. It's potentially one of the most normal human-sounding screams in the entire game that don't come from the player. Because of course, when the player, you know, takes damage, he goes like, oh, and or when he dies, he goes ah, and stuff like that. But Artorias is the only other character who sounds so distinctly like what you expect a human to sound like, instead of, you know, other enemies. Oh, I'm getting a phone call. Hold on. Oh man, good thing I answered. It's very important stuff. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, the fact that he sounds so human, even though he's corrupted by the abyss, and even though he doesn't say a single thing, and he's probably not even human because he's giant, and but as far as I know, the Knights of Gwyn were not human, and they despise humans. At least Lozblade Kieran does. I don't know. To me, it sounds very pained. It sounds very like I feel like that you can project a lot onto Artorias' scream, but that scream is like one of my favorite sound effects in the entire game. There's just so much. There's so much emotion. There's so much pain. There's so much character to just that one scream, and the fact that he doesn't talk at all, except so you never get to hear his voice, except for his weird like corrupted screams that he does. To me, it's very wonderful. Very like, you know, it just hits in a way. It hits well, and it does its it serves its purpose very well, and I really appreciate that. Once again, like I say, you know, Dark Souls might have a lot of sound effects that are from like audio banks, and that are from you know, copyright free things, but there's also a lot of sound effects that are you know, specifically designed for the game. And I don't know if that's a sound effect or if it's a voice acting thing. I guess it's a little bit of both, right? Voice acting is part of the sound design of a game, I suppose. But I really like the way the sound design of Artorias' scream is. It tells you a lot about him. I have his soul. I'm not gonna eat it because there's an NPC that you can talk to that very much wants his. I don't know if he shows up or if you have to quit and reload. I think you have to quit and reload. That. Yes, here she is. Made a makeshift grave.
You. Is that not the soul of the man who fell on this spot? He was a dear friend. I wish to pay proper respect with that soul. Would you be willing to part with it?
If you give her Artorias' soul, she gives you her weapons, and she says that she's gonna retire from fighting. If you want to keep Artorias' soul but still want her weapons, you can just kill her. But I'm a nice guy.
Thank you. You are very kind. Please take this. I no longer need it.
Thank you very much.
May the Lord guide thee. May the Lord guide thee.
She's supposed to be an assassin of sorts, as far as I know. It's she's very mysterious. I'm I'm gonna call it quits for today. I know this post time skip section was very short, but I expected it to just be you know, like 3 hours of me bashing my head against Artorias again. But it turns out that if you can stagger him, he's quite simple. But it's still a very satisfying fight. I feel like I just played really well here. I'm sure like with my level of play here, I could have defeated him even with the S-Talk without staggering him. But who knows? But I don't know if I'm gonna continue the DLC, if I'm gonna try to do another area and then come back to the DLC after doing another area. I think that could be a good idea. But we'll see. We'll see how I decide to go about things. But all I wanted to say was, I think boss fight design in this Soul series. Before I go, actually, I want to say one last thing before I go. I think the boss design in Souls games, and by Souls games I mean, you know, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, you know, the Dark Souls series, and Elden Ring to a certain extent. It's evolved a lot from its early days up until now. You know, in the early days, the focus of the boss fights was really to evoke certain emotion. So when you fought really difficult bosses, the emotion was supposed to be like fear and panic, and the emotion was supposed to be satisfaction upon defeating them. And then over time, the axis started pointing towards more of skill-based boss fights, less over emotional boss fights. And because, you know, puzzle bosses tend to evoke certain emotions in you, because puzzle bosses, you know, okay, to clarify what I mean by puzzle bosses, I mean bosses where they're not necessarily as straightforward as they seem, and a lot of the challenge of the boss fight comes from trying to figure out how to defeat them. Whether it's something as still a pretty straightforward combat fight, such as the Fool's Idol in Demon Souls, where it's a regular boss fight, except there's a little gimmick, and the little gimmick is that you have to basically deal with a certain NPC. You have to deal with a certain NPC beforehand, otherwise the boss will infinitely respawn. So it becomes a thing of like navigating the level before the boss to find said NPCs so that you can then make it so the boss doesn't respawn. I would consider that a puzzle boss. And the emotion it's meant to convey is like confusion and anger, because you're like, what the hell? Why is the boss resurrecting all the time? Why can't I defeat it? I'm being humiliated right now. There's like an NPC somewhere laughing at me, being like, you know, no matter how you'll try, you'll never be able to take her down as long as I'm alive. And you know, or another puzzle boss could be something like let's say something that we've seen in this game, so it feels like a more concrete example. Okay, well, okay, maybe not a puzzle boss, but let's say this: Moonlight Butterfly. Moonlight Butterfly is a boss where you have to wait for it to land to attack it, and then you have a very brief window to attack it, and then you have to wait for it to land again. And that boss fight is beautiful. The boss is beautiful. The music is beautiful. The arena, I would say, has a sense of beauty to it. So I would say the Moon and Butterfly is a not necessarily a gimmick fight, but it's not a skill fight. You know, not really. And it's just about basking in the beauty of that boss and to appreciate the boss. And it's more about the feel, you know, like there's a pacing to that fight, and the pacing is dependent on the two phases, the attack phase and the defense phase. Or if you want to think about another kind of puzzly boss fight, you could say like the Iron Golem. You know, the Iron Golem has it is a straightforward combat fight, but if you are able to stagger it and make it fall down the arena, then you can instantly kill it. So that's like a little puzzle, if you will, but otherwise you can still fight it straightforward. And the mixture of like a lot of bosses having a certain gimmick or like a puzzle to them, but still being able to be defeated as a regular boss if you can't figure out the puzzle or don't want to engage with the puzzle, I think that's very good. That's something that Dark Souls 1 does well. As Demon Souls, oftentimes if you don't engage with the puzzle, or you don't engage with the gimmick, you're not you can't defeat the boss. Like you have to engage with the gimmick. For example, fighting the King of Storms, you need the Storm Ruler. And you could even say like in oh, these guys have glowing eyes. That's how you know they're stronger. You could even say, for example, in in Demon Souls, let's say they had the Iron Golem in Demon Souls. I almost want to wager that in Demon Souls, if there had been the Iron Golem would have would be the kind of boss where because he's a golem, it's an artificial being, right? So the way I would have done it, and I think it would be in line with the Demon Souls, boss philosophy, so to speak, would be that he doesn't have as much HP as the current Iron Golem, but if you defeat him, he rebuilt himself because he's animated by a soul and he's like an artificial being. And then so you would have to stagger him and make him fall off the arena, because let's say the arena is like a bottomless pit. So even if he falls down the bottomless pit, he can't repair himself because he would just rebuild himself in the void. And there would be a lot of ways for you to maybe stagger the boss if your weapon didn't do stagger damage. Like there would be some like environmental stuff that you could interact with that would make the boss help you stagger the boss, let's say. Or there would be like an NPC that you can that would help you, that would be good at staggering the boss. Something like that, I'm not saying like I'm a great game designer or anything. I'm just an amateur, but I'm saying like that's the kind of what I would expect out of like Demon Souls like boss philosophy, which tends to focus more on unique, strange, kind of gimmicky encounters, as opposed to Dark Souls, which tends to have a little bit more combat-focused encounters with gimmicks that if you wish to interact with, you can. And there's a wide range of emotions that are evoked from fighting these bosses. Once you reach Dark Souls 2, there's a lot fewer gimmick bosses. A lot of the bosses are just humanoids with a shield and a sword, or like humanoids with a sword. And there's a lot more like dual like boss fights and multi-enemy boss fights that are just kind of meant to be challenging. And overall, it feels less satisfying, I suppose. And Dark Souls 3 has a lot of very satisfying bosses, but a lot of them are combat challenges that don't really evoke too much emotion, I would say. But they're very good. They're very good boss fights. I feel like you could say the gimmick of Dark Souls 3 boss fights is that they have multiple phases. Almost all the boss fights in Dark Souls 3 have multiple phases to some degree, whether it's only like the boss fight gets slightly more difficult in its second phase because like it buffs itself and now it does fire damage on top of doing regular damage. That's one way to do multiple phases, but then there's other ways to do multiple phases where like the entire moveset changes. But Dark Souls 3, it focuses on combat challenges, and the gimmick is to deal with the gimmick is to deal with the multiple phases, and to be able to execute the boss fights properly, because they're action-based boss fights. And then Elden Ring kind of follows suit with action-based multi-phase boss fights. And I think because you went from a mostly gimmick fights to a mixture of gimmick and action fights, but then the action fights are the one that got the most popularity and the most success, to then moving on to experimenting with combat gimmicks instead of just being gimmicks or combat, and also experimenting with varied boss fights but failing in Dark Souls 2. And then the only boss fights once again that were really praised were the combat heavy boss fights in Dark Souls 2, to then moving on to combat boss fights in Dark Souls 3 with barely any gimmick boss fights. And when there are gimmick boss fights, people complain, like High Lord Wolnir and the Curse Rotten Greatwood. People complain about those. So I feel like you can clearly see the progression from kind of weird ideas executed awkwardly to a single-minded focus on action executed really well. You can see how variety has decreased, but skill and craftsmanship has increased. So I can understand why Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring are so well received, and why the boss fights can be so satisfying in those games. Is because even though there's less variety in the kind of boss fights that you experience, on average, the quality of the boss fights has increased significantly. However, while I am a big judge of quality, I also think that it's important to offer varied experiences and varied because otherwise it starts to all blur in your head. In my opinion, at least, I appreciate creativity and experimentation, even if it's awkward, over very well executed, more generic, more samey feeling things. But that might just be me. Anyway, with this, I bid you farewell. It was a nice time skip, and here we are. Please go play some video games.